Hey guys, welcome to my House of Leaves reading vlog slash book review. I've been working on this for a full week straight, which might not sound like a long period of time. It really doesn't as I'm saying it now, but I actually already filmed an intro clip last Sunday. It's Sunday when I'm filming this right now, but that was back when I was so young and naive, before I had read a single word of anything Danielewski wrote in House of Leaves. There were just so many things that I think I need to say up front at the very beginning of this video that I didn't mention then. So I'm popping in here right now, and then you're also going to see this version of me at the end of the video after the vlog portions, after the found footage clips of me reading this book. To kind of give you my full thoughts, my full review. I'm gonna go ahead and like spoil you for the vlog content just a little bit and tell you this is my new all-time favorite book. I'm not exaggerating, I'm not being overdramatic. I've never had a reading experience like this before, and I still haven't done as much research into it as like I want to. I want to really go down the rabbit hole of reading different forums, reading everyone else's opinions. I know Books and Lala has a House of Leaves live book show coming up at some point this month. I'm not sure if she has a date for it yet, but I don't know. I feel like there are a lot of things I'm gonna be doing in the coming weeks to try to better understand everything I just read. But for the time being, I am absolutely in love with it, and so I really want you to know that in watching these vlog clips that I do love this book. Now, with all of that being said, I am by no means a House of Leaves expert. I don't even know what I'm talking about half the time in general, much less when it comes to something as deep and philosophical and postmodern as House of Leaves is. Postmodern or rejection of postmodernism? I don't know. I'm going to talk about that at the end of the video because if you're still watching at that point, you care, but I don't want to scare anyone away yet. So if you have read House of Leaves and you want to talk about it, feel free to talk all about it in the comments, but let's try to keep everything spoiler free because I really want to encourage more people to pick this book up, and I really don't want anything to be spoiled for people just innocently scrolling through the comments. So again, we can chat about it, but let's like not get into anything super specific. And if you do want to talk about any of it with me, I'm really eager to talk about this book. I have my social media links in the description. Feel free to message me. I'll probably be checking them later today and tomorrow. So yeah, I have a lot of ideas. I'm sure you have a lot of ideas if you've read it, but I just don't want anything to get spoiled in the comments. Speaking of spoilers, this is going to be like a 95% spoiler-free video, but I do want to get into a few just very minuscule spoilery thoughts in the last probably 2 minutes of this video. So I will give you plenty of warning. You can watch just about this entire video. And when I say spoilers, I'm not spoiling anything about the plot of this book, but at the very end of the video, I want to talk about what I think this book is and kind of what it means or what this book as a whole symbolizes. So it's not really a spoiler, but I would feel bad if like it's something that I didn't know when I started the book and that I'm glad I didn't know when I started the book. So anyway, just keep all of that in mind, and let's just go ahead and start rolling the vlog clip, starting with me last Sunday before I even knew what this book was. Hello everybody, thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you're watching this right now, that means I did it. I read House of Leaves. This is by far the very most intimidating book that I have, not just on my physical TBR, but it's probably the very most intimidating book that I think I've ever heard of, maybe besides Infinite Jest. And that's really coming partly because of the sheer size of this thing. Like, I know there are going to be a lot of blank pages in here, there are going to be some pictures, but there's a lot of typewriter font, there's a lot of footnotes that just sound insane, and to be just completely transparent with you, I've had some very stressful things going on in my life recently, and I am ready to just hyper fixate on something that isn't real. Like, it's not a real situation. I'm hoping there's going to be some horror in this book. I have to admit, I'm going into this book almost completely blind. When I hear people talk about House of Leaves, the very first thing that they talk about that I have seen usually is the format and the way that the book is written, and then how complicated it is to read. So I think that first of all is really interesting. Really fast, let me actually set this book down. It's too heavy for me to hold up with one hand, and this video is all about one book anyway, so like at any point in this video you know what book I'm talking about. But yeah, I just want to talk a little bit about how cool it is that when people talk about House of Leaves, one of the first things that comes to mind is the format of the book and how the story is presented to the reader, and how convoluted and complicated that can be, but also how rewarding it can be for the reader to feel like you really are sifting through artifacts and clues. And people always say like, oh, it's kind of like a found footage situation. I mean, I don't know what any of that means in terms of the context of the actual story. I don't even think I understand what genre this is. The first one that comes to mind is horror, but I've not read the book and I've not done a ton of research into it because I want to go into this experience blind. So I have no idea what I'm in for. I mean, just in looking at the back of this book, words that are jumping out to me are like sexy, postmodern, genre wrecking. Like, how am I supposed to know what this book is about just in looking, like reading the inside flap in the back of the book? The very last little blurb even says a love story. Like, I just have no idea what to expect, and I've not felt this much excitement about a book in a while. I'm hoping, I want to posit a thesis. Is that even how you word that? I've been out of school for so long. But I have a prediction that maybe, just maybe, this book is going to be a little bit more accessible than what the general public has built it up in everyone's minds to be. I don't think that came out right. Pretty much what I'm trying to say is I want you to watch me read this book, and then maybe we can attack some of the gatekeeping that's been going around with this story for so long. This came out in 2000, and I feel like I've had a lot of people tell me that like, oh, I personally loved that book, but I don't think it's for you. I don't think you would like it. Okay, why? Is it because you think I can't comprehend? Is it because of like what is actually going on in the plot? I understand that this book is such a cult classic, and I understand that whole concept, but like, does that mean that it's not accessible to everybody? I don't know. I'm so excited to kind of explore everything, go on this reading journey. Again, keep it spoiler free, but also just open up a conversation about the book, the plot, the format, but also like, what is it that has just like sewn this book into our pop culture and like especially like postmodern horror? I want to say horror, and I will literally cut all of this out if I am wrong. I'm not above doing that, so if I've left it in, then I'm kind of on the right track. Basically, just what is it about this book that has made it so appealing to everybody for the past 20 years? And also, I feel like it's made a resurgence in 2020 and 2021. I've seen this on so many different TBRs this year, and I'm just curious. I just have FOMO right now. I have fear of missing out on what everyone else is talking about. I'm gonna jump into it. I will probably update you tonight because I really just want to take this Sunday afternoon to make as much progress as I can through this book. Hey guys, it's been a few nights since filming that first clip. It's now Tuesday night, and I've made a lot of progress on House of Leaves, and I have so many thoughts. I have so many things I want to talk about. I have a lot of really spoilery thoughts that I'm going to not put into this section of the video because I want everyone to be able to like still watch the vlog and enjoy like me reading this book without spoiling yourselves for anything. So I'm not going to get into any of that here, but with that being said, I definitely do want to talk about the characters that have been introduced as well as some of the major plot points that have happened. And again, I'm using my own discretion in saying there are no spoilers here, but of course, if you don't want to know absolutely anything about this book at all, then like you've been warned that of course I am going to be talking about the book. I really hope that made sense. To give you an update of where I am in the book, I just hit chapter 7. I'm on page 80, but that is not including the Roman numeral pages that were at the beginning of the book, as well as like some footnotes and letters that I've had to like flip through and read from the end of the book. So I know it might sound like I've not read that much in 3 days if I say I'm only on page 80, but this book does take some time. I don't want to say that it's difficult to read. I think that a better word for the time being, like so far, I would describe it as being just a very tedious reading experience. And I would say that if you really want to read this book, then you can read this book. There's nothing holding you back. But with that, I think that it takes a lot of patience and it takes a lot of determination. You have to have the willpower to get through all of these different stories to be able to enjoy yourself. I feel like you've got to find the middle ground of being able to relax and have the patience to take it slow and enjoy the story, and also maybe overthink a few things when you need to. And that is exactly how I'm reading the book. Looping back to the point I was trying to make though, it's definitely something where I think the more energy and the more effort you put into reading the book, the more of a reward you're going to take from the story. I don't know that for a fact yet. I've not finished the book. I'm not really even super far into the book, but just that's kind of what I'm seeing just with how much I have read so far. One thing that I did kind of obsessively right up front at the beginning of the book, I would say probably through the first 30 to 50 pages, is I just kept going over these three main characters in my head to make sure I just had everything straight. So Johnny Truant, Zampano, and Will Navidson. In order for any of my thoughts to make sense, let me break down these three men. I'm gonna try to do it as simply as possible, but it is a convoluted book, so I hope that I can like get everything across that I'm gonna try to. Okay, I think it's gonna be easiest if I start off by explaining who Johnny Truant is. Johnny is a young tattoo artist, and we start the story with his foreword, and it's told in the Courier font, so it looks like it's being typed on a typewriter kind of font. And Johnny's this young guy, kind of hangs with the wrong crowd. I definitely think he's a smart guy, but he's just a little rough around the edges. Johnny's account of things start when he and his friend go into this man named Zampano's apartment, and they find him there dead. So since he's dead, they start looking around for things to take in this house or apartment, wherever they are. So Johnny decides to take this case of papers, like it's like this huge, well, he doesn't know at the time, but it ends up being this huge, crazy manuscript for a book that Zampano was writing about a film called The Navidson Record. And the Navidson Record, by all accounts in this story, never existed. Okay, so that explains who Johnny is. Zampano, like I just said, he is the dead man who very early on we find out that he is a blind person. And he's writing this, I don't want to even call it a story. It's like an academic journal, like research that he has done on this documentary that was created by this man named Will Navidson, who is actually a real person in this fictional world, as far as we know. Will Navidson is a Pulitzer Prize award-winning photojournalist, but whereas like there are records that suggest this man was a real person, there's nothing that anyone can find about the Navidson record. So it's just kind of strange starting things off like that. Now, like I just said, Will Navidson, who is the third man coming into play at the center of everything going on in this book, he has a wife, he has 2 children, and he's going through some marital problems with his wife. So he decides that the family's going to move out. I think they moved to Virginia, but they moved somewhere to this new house in order to try to fix everything and start fresh. And once they move into this house, they realize that the dimensions are off in the house and that it's actually a little bit larger on the inside than it is on the outside. And then just more strange occurrences and just like differences like that start popping up in the house as they continue to live there. And supposedly that is what his documentary is all about. It is the story of the family moving into the house and then the weird things happening once they're inside the house. So the book that Zampano is writing about this movie it's kind of like part of it is a play-by-play of what the documentary itself is, but Zampano is also inserting his own thoughts, his own musings, as well as his own research that he has done. He's done extensive research on this documentary, and so he inserts a ton of his own footnotes at the bottom of pretty much every single page, talking about either where he learned something, or he also includes little links to what would be like good supplemental texts and things that the reader can read to even better understand a point that he is trying to make or drive home. But then the thing is, yeah, some of these footnotes talk about real articles or real photography that do exist in our world, your world, my world, but then some of it is completely made up. So I just hinted on it, but the last thing I really want to talk about that's going on in terms of the format of the book, Johnny's telling his own story in the footnotes of what we are reading. So first of all, we're reading the Navidson record, which is what Zampano has written about Will Navidson's family. We're reading all of that. We're reading his little research and everything. But then Johnny will add his own footnote, like I just said, that is told in like a Courier font. So let me find an example. So like, I don't know if you can tell, but all of that is written in the Courier font like a typewriter. Well, guess what? All of that is a footnote from something where we were reading a story down to here, we stop, we read footnote that starts footnote, page of footnote, 2 more pages of footnote, more footnote, then we go back to the story. So here's where things get controversial, okay? As if things weren't already controversial and convoluted. Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. For me personally, when I'm reading a book, I always use bookmarks, but I do not have to stop at the end of a chapter. I don't have to stop at the end of a page. I will stop in the middle of a sentence. Like when I'm reading, if my attention goes elsewhere, I will stop in the middle of a sentence, put my bookmark in, move on with my day, come back exactly where I was and pick back up and like just not struggle with it. That's how I like to read. And then on top of that, I'm always reading like 5 to 10 books at once because my attention, like the second my brain gets bored, I move on to something else. So for me, this is perfect because it's almost like clockwork so far of every time my brain starts getting like a little bit bored with the story. Like even though it's not like boring stuff is happening, but just every time I'm like, okay, I'm kind of ready for another footnote, one pops up. And I feel like, I don't know, I feel like that's not going to be a super popular opinion. I've not really listened to many other people talk about it yet. I've done a little bit, but I'm so scared I'm going to spoil myself. I'm trying to hold off. But one thing I do really love so far, I love Johnny. I am equally invested in the Naviton record as I am with Johnny's story. And I'm just so interested to see if Johnny's story about his own life, his upbringing, what's going on a day-to-day basis with him and his weird pining that he has going on for different women in his life. Sometimes it brings some levity to the story because, of course, the Naviton record is a paranormal story about a house, and it's creepy. So far I've not been scared, but I'm sure I will be eventually. But I like how everything is broken up to where things don't have time to get too intense with one part. I don't know, it's really working for me. Johnny's footnotes really are anecdotal. They're not adding anything to the found footage aspect of the story so far, but giving me a lot of insight into his life, and they have made me genuinely care for him. I feel like by the end of this book, unless something just completely goes off the rails, Johnny Truant is going to be my very favorite literary character of all time. But the second thing that his footnotes have done for me is it's shown me that he is quite possibly an unreliable editor, and I'm just gonna leave it at that because it's not a spoiler. It happens right up from the book of we as readers realize that Johnny might be able to do more to this text than just insert his own notes at the bottom. Okay, that's all I'm gonna say about it. And again, that's right up front, but it kind of, when it happened, it flipped everything on its head for me because it was just my very first moment of what is actually going on here. Okay, so my camera actually died like going on 3 hours ago, so I just took that time to sit in my chair and read, and I feel like I look wrecked now. And then the kicker is that I started that little break on page 80, made it to page 81 or 82, and it sent me to chapter 13, which was like 250 pages into the future of the book. And then I read from page like 314 or so to 347, and that took me hours. But it's getting so good, it's getting so interesting, and like I don't want to include any of that in tonight's update because I was supposed to read that tomorrow and just things haven't gone to plan. I have no idea where I just left off. I'm sure I was rambling, but I do have like a few more thoughts that I want to get out that like I do have written down here that I know that I want to mention up front at the beginning of the video. Mainly, I want to say that last night when I was reading, I had a footnote that sent me to some letters at the end of the book. I'm not going to tell you what the letters are. If you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. But these letters were so interesting to me. A lot of them were told in like really weird formats, especially towards the end of the group of letters. And there was also one letter that was written completely in a code that I was having to break down, and I thought that was going to be so much fun when I was about one sentence in, and after a few pages I actually was feeling nauseous. Like I was getting so mad at this book. I was having to write out this code in the margins because like my brain couldn't compute to do it fast enough in my head to like remember what I was reading. And like the code I was breaking down seemed to get repetitive at one point, but then I thought, no, what if I don't keep trying to solve this, and there's just like a sentence in the middle of everything that is like the key to the whole book. I don't think that's the case, but I was worried, like I didn't know. So I sat there trying so hard to decode this letter, and I started getting those prickles in my hair on my head like you get right before you start sweating. Like I was angry, and now in hindsight I'm glad I've gotten at least one visceral reaction from the book. I was hoping the first one was gonna be like nausea in a different way from like the horror of the book, but it's interesting to note that I have gotten really angry with it so far, but in a good way. Like it's not in a I'm complaining way. It's just like I wanted to note that here. Yeah, I don't know. I think that's enough for tonight. I have like 4 more pages of notes to go through, but I kind of want to save at least a few of my thoughts because I think that I want to like let what I read tonight sink in a little bit more. I don't think any of those questions have been answered, but just a few of my notes and things I want to talk about. I think that things are going in a different direction than what I was thinking when I was typing all of this out, so we're gonna cut it off there for the night. Hopefully I'll see you in about 24 hours. Maybe I will be past page 82, but who knows. I'm just along for the ride at this point. I'm not rushing at all. Still thoroughly enjoying myself, and I'm about to go to bed. Good night. I'm still not sure what I'm reading. I think that yes, there are a ton of metaphors going on in the in Zampano's footnotes for this, but there are 2 that have stood out to me that I think that I'm going to try to keep in mind and think a little bit more about and maybe do a little bit of research into before I continue. The first is a biblical reference, and the reference was to Esau and Jacob, and they were twin brothers, and one brother kind of betrayed the other in some way and also deceived their blind father. So like I know that it's probably hitting me in the face, but I really don't know what it's supposed to mean. If Will Navidson and Tom, who are literally twins in the book, are they supposed to be representative of this in some way, because that's kind of where Zampano was going with this. But at the same time I feel like maybe Johnny is supposed to be tied into this metaphor. I don't know. I really need to like think a little bit more about it, but I'm also so scared to Google anything because I don't want to know like what ends up happening with the book. And the other thing I've been trying to like figure out a little bit more of why is this so like such a big part of the story is it's actually another mythological reference, and it is the story of the Minotaur and Minos or Minos, and I just really don't know much about it other than what I've been reading in this text, so I think it'll be worth it for me to look into that a little bit more before I continue. I can't decide if I want to keep reading or if I want to stop, look into it, and then continue. I don't know. I'm scared that part of the impact of the story is going to be lost if I keep stopping to do my own research, and I really don't want that to happen. I feel like that's kind of part of the book itself, is stopping and starting and stopping and starting, but I feel like there's enough of that going on in this text to where I really don't need to be actually putting the book down as much as I have been to look up some things, so I can't decide how I want to continue. Also, something else that I think is important to note is that the things that are really unnerving me about this book, it's really not the paranormal house story itself at all, and I've gotten to some truly horrifying stories that have come from that house that I think are disturbing, and especially to readers who don't read a lot of horror, it would be scary. And there are some very gory images that I've read in this book that it just didn't touch me like at all. I don't know, but I will say that those parts of the book would not be able to be as effective in being creepy and being scary to the reader if they weren't reading Johnny's footnotes that really have a lot of true everyday horror in them, especially when he starts talking about some things that happened to him in his childhood. There are just some true horror elements in his story that make me feel sad. It makes me feel sick. There was this one scene that really made me feel like I was gonna throw up, and I thought it was a little bit of a cheap shot because it involved a dog, and it's not drug out. It's very short, but I really thought I was gonna be sick. I really just didn't feel good reading that passage. But then when I read something like that and then immediately have to go back into reading something about a paranormal home, then it's a little bit easier for me to feel more unhinged while I'm reading. Whereas if I was just reading the Navidson record straight through, I don't want to say I would think it was silly, because it's not a silly story because of the crumbling relationship going on in that part of the book, but I just don't think I would think it was creepy at all, whereas when I'm jumping back and forth between reading about some horrifying things that Johnny talks about when I go back to the house, I'm a little creeped out. Okay, so sorry, I didn't even tell you where I am in the book now. Technically, I'm on page 122, and I'll insert some pictures because you probably can't see that well here, but we have reached the point in the story where the format has just hit pure chaos. That's the only way I can describe it. This is upside down. That is written backwards over there. We've got footnotes running along the side of the page. And to top it all off, I just hit another footnote that said, see chapter 17. So I've got 2 bookmarks going of that's where I am technically in the book. But I'm also on page 394 reading chapter 17. So I need to finish that before I can go back to my blue bookmark. This book has almost 700 pages, and I counted up all of the pages that I've read total so far, and it's a little bit over 250 or 260, something around that ballpark. And it is really encouraging for me because I've read some of the poems and some of the letters in the back of the book, but I've not hit any pages yet that are like these huge like blank pages, and I know a lot of those are coming up. So even though technically I'm not even halfway through with the book, I have a lot to look forward to of just skipping around these blank pages because I've not even had any of the like pages. My hand is just shaking now. This book's too heavy to hold up. The only other important thing that I can think of to say here is that I really have no idea where this story is going at all. Like, I think that it's going to be really cool and it's going to have a good payoff. I've heard people say that, but I don't even know what I'm reading anymore. I hope that the storylines come together more so than they have so far. I really would love to see some more connections between the different perspectives of the book. I would also be really glad if there are multiple layers of an aha moment. Like, I'm hoping that there's going to be some sort of reveal and point to the book if you're just reading it on a very surface level, and then I'm hoping there's going to be maybe some deeper meanings that we can dive into, since I feel like I've been working so hard to understand everything that's been going on. I don't know. I'm hoping. I'm actually going to get round 2 of the vaccine in a few hours, so I have a little bit of time to read before then, and I have some time to read tonight, so hopefully I can knock this book out by tomorrow and we can get this vlog up and we can start talking about this. Okay, don't get excited. I haven't finished it yet, but I did just weigh this and it only weighs 2.6 pounds from my calculations. I don't know why I'm struggling to like hold it up in every clip. Like it's not that heavy. Maybe it's because it's so floppy. I don't know. Even though I don't have many more thoughts to give you in this updated clip, like I feel like the bulk of my thoughts are gonna have to be in my book review, whatever clip comes next, but I am getting dangerously close to finishing this book because I've read so much of the back already, and as you can see, I'm where my blue bookmark indicates that I am. So technically, I am on page 408 now. Between last night and this morning, I was able to get through a lot of the blank pages that we were talking about yesterday. And then once I made it through those blank pages, that were like mostly blank pages, I caught up to some of the chapters that I had read earlier in the week that were really... Did you hear that? I just ripped my band-aid off. Okay, ow. Anyway, so technically, I've made it through like hundreds of pages since the last update, and I felt guilty not giving you another clip since this is a reading vlog, but in terms of the plot itself, I don't want to say things are getting repetitive because in terms of the plot, we're getting new information with every page, right? And we're getting insight from all of these different filmmakers or philosophers or psychologists and like things that are adding more meaning into the story that we do already know. And then we're also, even though we're kind of circling back to parts of the plot that the reader would feel like they would already be familiar with, we're getting those points of the plots from new perspectives, and we're getting new insight into what we think was happening of the story. If you've not read this book, this probably isn't making any sense, but that's the best way that I know how to describe it. So I think technically I have about 100 pages left of this book that I have not already read, and that's not including the index. I'm not going to be reading the index like cover to cover because it just has things like, just looking here, it'll say like mom, and then it is a true index. It lists every page where the word mom is written. So like that's not something I'm gonna read, but it is something that after I get on some online forums and go down the rabbit hole of all the meanings of everything I'm not understanding, it will be cool. Like if I think, oh, let's revisit the echo theory here, then I could go to the index, look up echo, and then go to every page and everywhere that it is mentioned in the book. Like it's very convenient, but it's not something I'm gonna read through. So not including the index and then keeping in mind all of the different appendices and letters and poems and quotes that I have already read from the back of the book, even though technically it looks like I've got a lot left, I really don't think I do. And just to go ahead and beat a dead horse, I'll say it again, I wanted to do this last update just in case I sit down and all of a sudden finish the book. Like it's such a weird experience that I have no idea how much longer it's gonna take me to read. I wouldn't be surprised if it takes me 45 minutes. I also wouldn't be surprised if it takes me 4 more hours. Like I just have no idea, and it is weird. It's such a cool experience. The last thing I want to say really quickly before I go ahead and knock the rest of this book out is that I still do not know what this book is, and I still don't know where anything is going. I can't see where this is heading. Every time I think that I know what's going on, we either change stories or I'm proven wrong in some way. So it's just so weird. I have a ton of unanswered questions. I really don't think that anything that I have been asking myself in my own personal Google Doc, I don't think anything's been answered there. Well, next time you see me, we'll be ready to chat some more. All right. I finished it. I finished House of Leaves. This is my favorite book that I've ever read. I probably should be waiting to film this book review to give myself a little bit more time to sit on it, but I also think it's really rare that the second I close a book that I'm able to turn my camera on and just start speaking really honestly and genuinely about my thoughts. So I'm just gonna try to capture it here. This is probably not as eloquent as you want it to be, definitely not as eloquent as I would like it to be. But these are my honest thoughts about the book. I now understand why when people talk about House of Leaves, they're not necessarily talking about the plot, and really they're not even talking about the characters, even though I really do think this is largely a character-driven book. I just cut out 13 minutes of me trying to search what genre this book is. I mean, obviously it's horror, but there's this name and I can't think of it. I'm gonna look into it. I'll put it on the screen here. But the genre where the reading experience itself is a main part of the book, and I just didn't know that going into it. I knew that the text was going to be splayed out like pretty strangely all over the page at some points in the book, but I didn't realize this was an entire genre. I didn't realize that was going to be this book's thing. What I'm trying to say is, were the different plots intriguing? Were they interesting? Did they grab me? They certainly did. Were the characters some of the most compelling characters I've ever read? Yes, they were. And then on top of that, for the absolute star of this entire book to be the way that it was told, my mind is completely blown. This is never going to happen again with a reading experience for me. And now that I've finished the book, I thought I was gonna feel really happy, like a big weight has been lifted off my shoulders, and part of me feels like that. But like I just said, I feel like I'm never gonna have another reading experience like this again. And sometimes I feel like that after I read an amazing psychological thriller where there's this huge twist and my mind is completely blown, and then I go through a dry spell for like 2 years where I can't find something else that blows my mind like that. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I know that someone can write another twist that's really gonna get to me. I don't know if I can ever have another reading experience like what House of Leaves just gave me. I mentioned it earlier in the video, but Johnny Truant is probably my new favorite literary character of all time. I absolutely loved his stream of consciousness footnotes. I loved getting a sneak peek into his life. I loved feeling attached to his character just for him to be like ripped away from me when I had to go back to the actual story. I feel like all of that is what really kept me turning the page. Since you just watched the vlog, you know that I loved having my attention split between the different parts of this book, because part of it was a little less is more. I feel like no one has ever explained House of Leaves by saying, yeah, less is definitely more, because he was absolutely doing the most with it. Like, this entire book was a choice. It was a good choice, in my opinion, because we just kept getting small snippets of different things. It was the epitome of less is more for me, because I wanted to know more exactly when the story was getting cut off and I had to jump around somewhere else. It was genius. Also, Johnny's voice was just so consistent throughout the entire story that I feel like I would have known that it was his footnote besides the fact that he was telling his own story, like if Johnny just wanted to come in with a certain comment about something, I'm glad it was not written this way, but I feel like the writing, like his voice was so clear that I would have been able to tell it was him and his comment, even if the font didn't change between the Times font and the Courier font. It probably helps Johnny is 25 during most of this book. I'm 25, maybe I felt some sort of kindredness to him, which now that I'm saying that, like, no, we don't have literally anything in common. We have nothing in common. So why am I so attached? Why am I so attached to this man? While we're on the topic of characters, let's go ahead and run down a few of the other ones. Zampano, I don't think this is much of a spoiler, but obviously since he's dead at the beginning of the book, we are not getting to see any of Zampano through the rest of the book besides what he's writing. Again, not a spoiler, he dies at the very beginning of the book. So I really don't have much I want to say about him. I mean, he was there, okay? And then getting into the Navidsons, I don't know what I want to say about them. I know that the Will Navidson, Karen, actually, I don't even think they're husband and wife. That was revealed later in the book unless I missed something right up front. But this couple that has moved into this house, I liked them. I cared about them. I cared about their relationship, and I thought that their parts of the story were very interesting, but I do not feel like I know those people. Like if they were put into a certain situation, I feel like I know how they would act based on how they were written, but I don't feel like I know these people, and I think that's really cool because if Danielewski wanted you to like feel like you were really there with these people, I mean, I did feel like I was kind of going on the adventure with them, but I don't feel like I know them like I was inside of Johnny's head. So it's really cool because that wasn't Danielewski writing them, it was Zampano or somebody else writing these people. So, oh gosh, my mind is spinning and I hope I don't sound absolutely insane. I probably do. But it's so interesting to think about the authorial intent there of, are we supposed to feel like we're one step away from them because we're supposed to be reading this account and reading this record, and we're supposed to be aware that we're consuming media within the physical media that we are consuming? I might have taken it too far there, I don't know. I think that's another reason that jumping back and forth between the footnotes worked so well for me, is because when we were in the house and we were in the hallway and we were in the dark, all of that action was enough to keep my thirst for the plot satisfied. And then again, I'll say it last time I'm gonna say it, I swear. But then when Johnny would come back in, I would get that emotional connection that I had been craving that I didn't have during the other perspective. There were a few others that were in the house with the family who came in and tried to help them investigate, but I didn't feel like I had enough time with those people to really get a great connection to them. I think that definitely the only other person who's really standing out to me in the story would be Tom, who was Will Navidson's twin brother. I do think that out of all of the characters in that entire story, I felt the most emotional connection to Tom, and I think that's because at one point in the book we get to see his found footage of him talking through his descent of a stairwell that is in this mysterious hallway in this haunted house. Not haunted, but paranormal house. So I did feel connected to him, but it's just nothing to the level that I'm ever gonna feel for somebody who has that stream of consciousness style of talking or writing. So I just covered the characters. I've covered enough of the plot. If I tell you anything else about this book's plot, I would just have told you the entire book. It's a very simple setup. It doesn't seem like it at the beginning when you start explaining it to somebody, but the entire book is a pretty simple concept once you are introduced to who everybody is and the purpose they're serving for the story. It's easy to keep up with. What's not easy to keep up with are all of the academic opinions and journals and all of the references going on in the story. That's where my head was starting to spin. I really think that it's supposed to be satire on academic criticism. Like, I was having major English major flashbacks in having to go through all of this stuff. It felt familiar to me, but I did not enjoy doing it. I didn't enjoy doing it in college. I didn't enjoy doing it in this book. Unless the text that I was supposed to reference was already on the page for me. I liked trying to go in and draw my own conclusions. I liked trying to find the parallels, but I was not about to crack open something that was not on this page. Ultimately, I'm glad that I made that decision, but I'm not going to tell you how to read the book because I really truly believe that there's no one correct way to read this book. If you had asked me this yesterday, I would have held firm to an opinion of, no, I really think there is a correct way you can read this, and it's how I read it, because obviously I'm gonna read it the way I think it should be read. First of all, it is not up for me to decide. Second of all, now that I've finished it, I just really think that you could have read this book however you wanted to, within reason. Like, don't read it page by page backwards, but you know what I mean. Like, if you want to skip around with the footnotes, if you want to just read it page by page, you'll definitely have a different reading experience than what I had, but I don't know if the end game is going to be so different. I think it would be really interesting to go back and read it a different way for the first time. I don't see myself rereading it or revisiting it anytime soon, but if I was going to start this book over for the first time and could give myself advice from me right now, I would tell myself, I think I want you to go for it linearly, because in having to skip to some of the later chapters while I was still at the beginning of the book, some things happened with characters that I feel like would have been more impactful for me if I had had more time getting to know them, or like knew them better as characters to see why they made the decisions that they made later on in the story. Again, I think I read it the way that it's supposed to be read, how like just in general someone would say, yeah, you're supposed to read until you see a footnote and then flip here and then flip here and then flip here. That's how I did it, but I think it would be really interesting to just read it straight through. I'm not telling you to do that, please don't get mad at me. I'm just saying I think it'd be interesting. I feel like all of this goes without saying, I gave it 5 stars. This is going to be hard to beat for my #1 favorite book of 2021. I feel like I've found it early. I'm now going to get into the spoiler part of the video, so you have been warned. Again, if you want to stick around, I'm not spoiling anything about the plot. So like, if you're mildly interested and just want to continue to hear my thoughts, I personally don't think these are really spoilers, but I am gonna talk a little bit about what I think the book means, so use your own discretion. Okay, so here's a play-by-play of what just happened when I finished House of Leaves. I finished the book, okay, and I came up on the appendices that I've already read, and I flipped through everything, like everything at the end of the book, to make sure that there was nothing that I missed throughout the story. And actually it was interesting, there were a few little poems and there were some pictures that I hadn't been like instructed to turn and flip back to and read through yet. So I don't know if my eyes just missed something or if that was intentional, that you needed to go flip through and make sure that you had read everything to make sure you finished the book. And I finished the book and I honestly thought, what did I just read? That can't be the end of the book. I have no idea what's going on. What about all of these theories that I had in my head that I have typed out, like I was doing my own research on? It wasn't explained. Nothing was explained. So here's me. I flipped to the handy dandy index in the back of the book and was going, no, what about Echo? What about the Minotaur? And I was going through like, okay, it's mentioned on this page, this page, this page. And I started flipping back through. I thought, no, what about, I mean, like I had gotten into, what does the word Zampano mean? Truant is a word that I know, and it kind of fits with what his character is doing throughout the story. Does that mean that Zampano's name means something? Sure enough, it does. Okay, let's look up Navidson. Does Navidson have a dual meaning? It doesn't mean anything. Does that mean that he and his family and his story didn't exist? So I'm going down, I'm just completely spiraling. All of this is like 2 hours ago. And then I realized it ignited a madness in me that directly reflected the madness that all of the characters have descended into throughout this book. I don't know if that's what I'm supposed to take away from it, but if it is, then this book didn't just break the third wall, it completely shattered it, because it makes its reader a victim of the house and of the story itself. I don't know what's real. I don't know what's not real. I don't know where all of these loose ends that I would have sworn to you last night had meaning. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. And it's so interesting when I go back and watch these vlog clips of me, because I said it. I called it so early and just couldn't see it because I was blinded. But I just kept saying, yeah, I have these theories and I have these questions, but as soon as I write them down, it seems like they get contradicted. And so then I'm not sure, but then I'll come back and think, no, wait, I think I was onto something. No, girl, you weren't. Like, you were, but you weren't. Not only do I think there's not one correct way to read the book, I also don't think there's any one correct way to interpret meaning from this book at all. So please don't come for me if you have a different opinion. It is so fun to have different opinions than other people. Please don't get mad at me. But I just think the way that it's written, I think that Danielewski was trying to make things so uncanny that you could not turn a blind eye to them. Just for example, let's casually mention that Will Navidson and Tom are twin brothers, and then soon after that, let's get into a biblical story about Esau and Jacob where they are twin brothers as well. And then, whoop, they have a blind father. Okay, well, let's go back to the story then. There's literally someone in this book that is a blind person, Zampano. So even though those are two different stories going on within this book, the reader can't help but draw a connection and think, oh my gosh, is this going somewhere? But also it seems too obvious. You're thinking, there's no way. That's what they want you to think. And so then you'll read some more and you'll think, yeah, exactly. That's what they wanted me to think. That's not where the book was going. But then there will be another little nugget in there of like, no, actually, I think I was onto something to start with. That is just a small example, and I only bring that one up because I know I mentioned it a little while back. You know, we'll also have a little passage of Johnny dreaming that he's the Minotaur. Well, does it come back up? I don't know. I don't know how to interpret that without outside information, but there was never a page in this book that said, this is what this meant, and this is what this meant, and then this is what this meant. And I guess it was a little naive of me to think there was gonna be this aha moment, because there was not one. There was not one. I'm gonna have to keep researching this book, and I'm not by any means saying that this book doesn't have meaning, because it certainly does. All I'm saying is, I think that there are endless meanings to how different people can interpret what happened in the story and what the different metaphors were supposed to mean, what the different sources were supposed to mean. The possibilities are just endless based on what your own experiences have been and what your own knowledge is and how much research you're willing to do. It's like a choose your own adventure. It's gonna be different for everybody. That is where I'm sitting with it. I can definitely see where that would make some people really, really angry, especially after pouring a ton of time into it. But for me, I thought it was perfect. He tricked me. I felt absolutely gutted when I finished it. Was so dearly disappointed, but at the same time, so satisfied. Like, I had an evil grin on my couch, just like, you did not just do that to me. And again, I'm never gonna have another reading experience like this. I'm so glad I caught all of it on camera because this was such a thrilling ride. That's it. I'm like racking my brain making sure there wasn't something else that I wanted to include. I really don't think there is. Thank you guys so much for watching this. If you want to see more of me just reading one book or two books over the course of 1 week, let me know, because it's kind of hard for me to commit to secret TBRs sometimes, but I can definitely manage 1 or 2 books if you're interested in seeing stuff like that. So let me know. That'd be nice to know if you guys liked stuff like this. And if you have any books you want me to read for a reading vlog, let me know, especially if it's one that's gonna like really make me think. Give me your recs in the comments. Again, thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.